Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. I've got SB or Esperanza on the show with me, who I know from my local yoga center, actually. And we met when I was being loud and noisy in a boxing class, and she had the courage to come up to me and say, "Oh, you're not an idiot. You're quite a nice person," which was very kind of you to say, SB, to notice. I am an idiot, and I'm also kind. I'm both, so that's fine. And SB is also one of my neighbors, and we've got to know each other a bit through doing yoga and boxing and stuff like that. And SB has a really interesting story as a human being and as a mom and as somebody who sort of is dealing with health issues and becoming more and more interested in solutions. And runs a really interesting magazine called Wholetalk, which we're going to get to talking about. But first of all, welcome, Essie. How are you doing?
Hello, thank you for having me. Very well, very excited to be here.
Good, good. Hopefully the excitement stays and I don't bore you to tears halfway through.
Love
Sort of,
talking about yoga and boxing and all of that, so I'm
yeah.
sure it's good.
Okay, so it's good. And I'm very excited because having talked to you a bit about your background, it was it's a really interesting story and one that I really like to promote, which is somebody sort of being faced with struggles, genuine real life struggles, and wanting to find solutions to them. But I'm guessing from your name, you're not a native of Hackney, which is where we both live. And something about your accent gives it away as well. So where are you from, SB? I know, but people listening don't.
I am from Spain originally. I was born in Barcelona, but I grew up in the Canary Islands. And that's why, yeah, my accent, yeah, you can tell. And I moved here when I was 23 to the UK, so it's been a while now.
Yeah, yeah. Not that long, because it's hardly like you're in your 70s, so that's not.
Thanks.
And what
It's
brought you to UK? Sort of, I mean, it seems to me, as somebody brought up in the UK, I can't imagine why anybody would want to come from such good weather to such rotten weather.
Really? Well, I know what brought me here, and it was definitely fashion.
Right.
Fashion brought me to the UK. So I
Okay.
studied, I was always very into fashion since I was very young, and I studied fashion design in university in Madrid. And when I finished and graduated, I wanted to go somewhere else where I could develop my career a bit further.
Right.
And I thought of London. I mean, London is a great, I guess after Brexit is maybe not so much anymore, but it
Yeah.
was a great place to be for fashion because it's so creative and vibrant and has so many like new designers and great schools for design. So yeah, I decided to come here, do some internships, learn the language, and hopefully get a job.
I
And
was always think of London as having a really good street fashion, street art sort of culture, because I grew up in
yeah,
the 70s on punk and Vivian Westwood and so on.
what a
And
great time. I'm so jealous anyone growing
yeah,
up in the 70s
yeah,
because
yeah.
like my favorite fashion is the 70s fashion and the music. The music, the fashion from the 70s is the
Yeah.
best.
I was there. I wore bin bags and safety. That was me.
Oh,
And yes, I remember New Romantics, and I was a New Romantic as well. I don't know if that hit Spain or not, but yeah, that's how I grew up. And I always think of London and the UK very much like that. And that was obviously one of the things that attracted you to. What attracted you to fashion as a kid then? What was your sort of growing up like? Was it in the
you know what?
family or?
Not really. My family, yeah, it's very much I mean, not the opposite to fashion. My mom has great style and she always has had great style, but my dad has more like a lawyer, they come from the law environment.
Okay.
All of my siblings, three of my siblings actually are lawyers. So like it wasn't in my family. Yeah, there wasn't so much of an artistic side to it, but I don't know. I don't really know where it comes from, but I just remember being very into it and always like buying magazines. And I knew every designer, I knew every model on the catwalk. I knew I was very, very into it. So it was only natural that I ended up um doing fashion design afterwards. I also did during like a short time, I did a bit of modeling as well.
Okay.
So that kind of everything kind of like, was mixing together with being in the camera, off camera, and so I was fascinated by it,
Yeah.
and I guess that's why I wanted to do something professional,
Sure.
build a career essentially.
And do you
Um,
remember it being a sort of passion from a very early age, or was it something
my
late?
teenage years, I would say,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
as an early teenager.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
And
was always interested
it's
in
quite a
clothes.
challenging world to go into, though, particularly like modeling and stuff like that. And
It
uh,
is.
it's very
It is.
competitive.
Yeah, so it's two different sides. Modeling is one side, and the styling that I do today. So, because I'm not a designer myself, but I was always more interested in the styling and how you put the clothes together,
Yeah.
and that is what I do today. But it's both worlds are actually quite difficult and competitive in a way.
Yeah.
But I think when you're young and when you have a passion, like you don't really care. I mean, I didn't really care. I was just all in. I knew I wanted to do that, and that's all I wanted to do, and that's all I wanted to see. And I guess I was lucky because I had parents that supported me in that way. And even though my dad wasn't very into like me going into fashion, because he was like, "Oh, you're so clever." That's what he said, not my words. You could do, law or whatever. Like he still supported me.
Okay.
Um, so
So very loving parents and very supportive, even though you chose to go in a very different direction to them. Do you have siblings as well, or were you the only?
yeah, I'm one of five, so
Right.
I've got, I've got four siblings. Yeah,
Okay. Brothers, sisters?
I've got three brothers and one sister.
Wow. You
Oh
were the only
yeah.
girl.
Huh?
No, you were the second girl, first or
I,
second.
I I was I was the one in the middle. I had two up and two down, and I was the first girl. I've got total middle child syndrome, if you may. Because I'm in the middle. And and yeah.
Middle child syndrome. I'm a middle child, so I'm going to learn
I
something.
know. Well, I feel like I'm forgotten most of the time, even though I know my parents don't forget about me or whatever. But I felt like that's how I felt all the time, that I actually am very independent because I feel like I can't ask for help from anyone because I was always in the middle, and it was like the little ones were like they because actually what happened, I think, is my brother Pedro was born when I was 14 months.
Okay.
So even though I was very little, my mom thought, oh my God, she's so mature already. Because she had this new baby to look after. So since I was 14 months, I had to kind of like fight and be on my own and do my thing. So I think that's the way I see it, the middle child syndrome, where I think that they kind of like forgotten in between, sandwiched into like these, two and two
It's interesting.
siblings.
So you forged an independent path because you sort of,
Yeah, and I feel like to this day, my mom is always like, "Oh, she's fine, Space always fine." She's like, problem solving, independent, can get, and that bothers me because it's like, hang on a minute, no, I need help too.
I
Do
want my mummy as well.
Yeah, exactly. So,
We all want our mummy as well, don't we? That's
yes,
sort of
always.
truth of that. Okay. I mean, it's interesting. So there's three sisters older than me. So sort of almost a bit of a reverse, and then there's two boys, and I was
Oh,
the mid,
wow. So
and
you're
then
six, one of six,
no five, so
one of five. So,
three, four, five. Yeah, that's right. So
oh yeah,
three
yeah,
sisters. I thought, yeah, my maths is bad, but not that bad.
yeah. Oh, sorry, because I thought you said two after you. So yeah, one after you and three before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there was me and then my brother. And my brother was only 11 months after me. So my mum
Oh,
was
so there you go.
really
That's
busy.
insane.
That's insane,
That's
isn't it?
mental.
But it's that sort of Catholic stuff, which I guess you know about as well. So
Yeah,
I'm Irish Catholic, and sort of
yeah,
large families were just normal in Ireland, even though we grew up in
yeah.
England.
I
So
think back in the days, yeah, it was very common. I think my family's Catholic. Not my dad doesn't really believe in God so much, I guess. But yeah, I mean, when I ask about like why so many children, like my dad was like, I always wanted a really big family, so that's that's why. And it's like, okay,
I'd say
so
it's extraordinary, I think. I mean, we've really, the culture around the number of children has really changed hugely. Uh,
yeah,
and a lot to do with, of course, in the 60s and 70s, women got hold of fertility and birth control treatments and sort of became more independent, could make choices, uh,
yeah,
which has radically changed sort of women's lives and men's lives as well, and sort of radically changed the sort of size of families, etc. Uh,
yeah.
and we
But
see,
also, yeah, I mean now because I'm a mother, I guess I always took it for granted, right? Because I'm one of five and I never really thought so much about it. But now, because I have one that is 3.5 years old, I'm like, whoa, five? How do you cope with that? That's absolutely insane.
I don't know how do you do it.
Um, Even from an economic like perspective and financial perspective, it's like it was at the time when we grew up in the Canary Islands. Obviously, it's a different situation than like bringing five children in London today.
Yeah,
Um, I'm like, oh my God. And emotionally, how did you have? I mean, like my mom was very generous emotionally, I guess, because you
yeah.
have to give a lot.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. But also I think there's something about, I don't know if this was your experience as well, being have a large number of siblings, is that you fought amongst each other and you played amongst each other and you entertained each other and you avoided each other and all that sort of stuff. So in some ways the load was shared with your siblings. And
Yeah, yeah, I guess, yeah.
I mean, with me and my brother were very close because we were the boys. That's that thumbs up signal again. I don't know why my computer does that. It's so strange. I don't know how to turn it off. I think it's quite amusing. If I put two thumbs up,
I
I get.
like it.
I'll show you what happens when I get two thumbs up. Shall I? Watch this. Not
Oh my
amazing.
God, stop it.
I don't know why it does that at all. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah, that's so funny.
I have no idea, but there you go. Tech is not my strong point. I might ask somebody what he's doing that, but it's quite amusing. But I found sort of, with my brother, because we were the two boys and that gender difference and that gender split, that we were very close, my brother and I, and we were sort of typical boys of that era, I think, and we imagined we were stuntmen and we were just going to do insane things together that boys
I mean,
do.
I guess it's quite special because you were almost like twins if you think about it,
Yeah.
because you're
Really.
so close in age that there isn't much of a difference. So it is very special as well.
Were you
But
close to your siblings or were
I
you?
am very close to all my siblings. There's currently one that I'm not so close anymore because we had a little fight and we're not talking. But with the rest, with my sister, I'm close with all of them. But I guess with my sister, because she's also a young mom, and so we share a lot of things now, and we're very, very close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we
If
played
they,
the three younger ones, we played a lot when we were little.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, and we entertain each other a lot, and yeah, we work together all the time. So
Yeah. And also my memory is as well is, I don't know if this is similar to you, but certainly when I was growing up, neighbors, we played out much more. So like the summer holidays as a child for me were very much, my mum would give us some sandwiches in the morning and something to drink, and we weren't expected back until the evening. And off we would
nice.
go. And what we didn't know at the time was that all the other mums were doing exactly the same with their kids. So they were all looking out for us, so we
Yeah.
weren't alone, but we were sort of, there was a community and everybody knew each other and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which I don't think
Where was that?
necessarily,
In Ireland? Was
no,
that in
this was
Ireland?
in Birmingham, which
Birmingham.
in
Yeah.
England, which,
Yeah.
could have been Ireland. There's so many Irish people in Birmingham. I think there's more than Dublin. Your partner's Irish, isn't he? He's from Dublin, I think.
Yes. Hmm.
But we grew up in that sort of Irish diaspora. So, but I think the culture was different then. People were less afraid of stranger attacks and all this sort of stuff. What
Yeah.
was that? Were you quite free to roam when you were a child growing up?
So, yeah, I remember growing up in the Canary, we were in the mountains in the Canary Islands like most of the time. At the beginning, we were living in the city, and then we moved like further up to the mountains where
So
like we just get out, yeah, and like we had neighbor friends, and we would just kind of like wander around. You still needed the car there to go to certain places, so we relied on my mom for that,
yeah,
certainly to go like to places, but we did. But I especially remember the summers like that because my grandparents had a place in the Pyrenees in the
yeah,
Spanish side, and we would spend the summers there with all my cousins and everyone, and we were all so free to go around and do it because the village was small,
yeah.
so then we didn't have to be looked after, even though of course they were, you know, keeping an eye on us, but it just felt so free to be able to do that as a child.
Yeah, that's
You
a sort
felt
of
very
feeling I had
independent.
as well. Yeah, lots of freedom, and I
Yeah.
wonder whether children have that much freedom now. To be
I
honest,
think, I mean, I guess I think it's all related to the size of the cities. I think if there are smaller towns, maybe they will, you know, in villages or whatever, they'll be more free, but certainly in cities, I don't see that happening in London somehow.
yeah. Also, I wonder what you think about this as well, because you know that saying, "It takes a village to raise a child."
Yeah.
You know that saying, and the idea
Yes.
is that collective families and collective child rearing, although you still know who your mum and dad are, or your mum or your dad or whatever, but
Hmm.
actually everybody has a stake in making sure that children are
Yeah.
okay, looked after, and um,
Yeah.
also making sure that the parents are okay because it's hard work. So,
Totally. I think that is so, I mean, I mean, the saying couldn't be more perfect, but I think we have um a lack of community, I think. I mean, you have to build it, but I felt like we're almost as parents, and I can only talk from my experience, right? That I don't have my family or James's family close around to be that sort of community. So you have your friends, but we're often scared or embarrassed to ask for that help.
yeah,
You know, like, oh, you get messages when you give birth, like, let me know if you need anything. Is there anything I can do for you? And we often say, oh, it's okay, nothing. And we struggle to make things happen, but you still don't ask for that help.
it's interesting, isn't it? It
When
really is.
in reality, these people that are around that are asking you, do you need any help, will be delighted to offer help, right? So I always think like we need to ask for that help and like take it, you know. And now, like, because obviously I'm building a community with like then my neighborhood and people that are young parents as well. And if, you know, maybe one is traveling, one of the parents, so then the other one is staying behind with the kids, I'm always like, ask for the help. I'm here and I mean it. Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Like picking up or like dropping bread or like anything. It's not small. And I am so happy to help, right?
Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah,
I think it's
absolutely,
important. I think
absolutely.
it's so important. And I felt like sometimes in London, I felt like I can only pay, you know, to get my child looked after because it feels like you can only be paying for childcare. That's the only instead of so it's also it's an education not only from the community but from yourself, from
Sure.
like being able to ask for that help, you
Yeah,
know. So
and also
now
I
I
think
do. Yeah.
there is some sense in which things have disintegrated a bit, but there's also a sense, I guess, that people are afraid of these things, not just asking, but is that person safe? Have I got the skills? Are they safe enough? And all that sort of stuff. But I guess those of us that have experienced that village experience understand just how wonderful it is because it is a sort of much more natural state of affairs. Sorry, somebody's sending me a message. I shall turn the phone over so I ignore it. There you go. It's live, it's real, all those things. Um, so you had that experience, very stable, loving, caring childhood, and lots of interaction with family and extended family, and all those things which we know are really good things to have. Stable and stable attachment, but
Yeah.
also large social skills. If you have a large sibling network and then a large set of cousins and stuff like that, that actually it sets you up. We know it sets you up really well for the rest of life because of your interpersonal skills, your relationship skills, and also the ability to hold boundaries and stop people stealing your food and all that sort of stuff, which
Yeah,
which
definitely
siblings do.
food.
They're really annoying.
Fighting for food is like, yeah, it's real. I think
This is
to this day, I have that kind of tick when I'm eating, that I'm like a bit anxious at eating, because it's like, and it's like, no one is gonna steal your chips anymore, so relax. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
except my brother and sisters will. I promise you, they will. So don't go anywhere near my siblings when you're eating, because they'll steal everything.
yeah. Yeah, well, my husband does too, and I get very anxious because he eats much faster than I do, and he's like, no,
Uh,
but yeah.
So you went into creative field. Were you the only sibling that did that, or did others? Were you the sort of ploughing the furrow?
Yeah, from my siblings, I mean, it's only me. My other brother is a chef, so I guess he's creative as well in his own way, and
I would say that's very creative.
yeah. So, but yeah, the two of us are the ones that kind of like veered off a little bit from like the
Okay.
um,
So
yeah,
you somehow you started to plough your own furrow rather than
yeah,
just stay. So that, which again suggests, strong, stable attachment, because the idea of feeling good enough inside yourself so that you can experiment.
yeah. But it was hard too, because now revisiting those early years, I remember constantly being, like as a teenager, constantly fighting my way through in
Sure.
my family, like, because my brothers were twins and they were 5 years older than I was. So by the time I was a teenager, they were already gone in university. They didn't live with us anymore. So it was me kind of like, I want to go out. I want to go to parties. My older siblings didn't do that. So I felt like I was the one to fight for every first thing like that, from like, social to like a career that wasn't what like they expected. Not that they put much resistance, but still there was some sort of sense of like fighting for something to prove that I could do it, or like, why do you want to do this? And so there was a lot of that growing up, I remember,
What was
which
the
opened the way to my younger siblings in a way. Because my dad was very stubborn. He didn't like me modeling either. I remember he didn't even, it was something that I thought it was really fun, and my mom supported me, and but then he didn't want to know anything about it. He wouldn't come to any shows. He wouldn't, like he kind of ignored it. He said, like, when you're 18, maybe you can do it, because I started earlier. And then and it was fine, but I guess in some sort of way you have it deep down that maybe you're not supported fully in certain,
Yeah.
yeah.
What was his objection? Was he just thought you were wasting your skills, or
I don't know. I think, yeah, it's,
as a mum, thinking if you had a daughter who wanted to go into modeling, what would you say to her?
I would just explain my experience and be like, experience it. If you like it, go. And actually, I think it would be nice to have some sort of figure that has experienced it before you, so that can give you some
Oh,
wisdom.
yeah,
Because you're so young when you go into that world, and you're very raw, and you have to face certain experiences that can be quite hard at the same time.
yeah.
So having someone, like someone that has some knowledge and tells you like you're okay, or it would have been quite helpful
So
actually.
what was your experience going into that field then? Sort
My
of,
experience with modeling was, I mean, I deeply enjoyed it and it was great, but it also had the bad things of, the weight constantly, like you have to be thinner, you have your hips need to be measured a certain amount, and then I remember growing up, I never ever had any issues with weight because I was always tall, skinny. So it never even occurred to me that someone could tell me that. And when I went into this world, the whole thing with the centimeters on your hips, because you had to have like certain measurements. Now it's more inclusive. Nowadays, I feel like things are slowly changing, but back in the days, it was very like that. So it was just hard because um, there was some time that I stopped eating literally and just
right.
had like those kind of pharmacy meals that are prepared that you drink,
Yeah.
and I would just have that for a certain amount of time because I had to go to Milan and or whatever, and then I had to be very skinny for them. So all of that is quite messy because
Yeah.
you're not treating your body the right way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't have anyone behind or anyone to be like, you know what, don't do it. I don't know. I felt like you're very much at your own, this is what you have to do, this is what I have to do.
Sure.
And
I get it. But it does put
so
an actual stress on your body as well, doesn't it? Because
it, it
you're not
it
being
does.
healthy necessarily with the food and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that I never had a disorder, because
Yeah.
actually those times I did it, specifically because I was going to Milan, so I had to do a few days or a couple of weeks before or something, and I was always and I always bounced back easily to eating, and to this day I don't certainly have that kind of like, because I had other colleagues in that world that suffered from some disorders. So
Yeah.
um, but still, it kind of physically and mentally affects you, I
Yeah.
guess, because you're looking at your body the opposite way, rather than like you have to nurture it to be healthy. You're kind
Yes,
of like looking
exactly.
from the outside
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
which is what made me go into studying what I study later on after giving birth, with nutrition and well-being, because I realized that it's flipped the image. We have to go the opposite way rather than.
I wondered if that was part of the story, which is why I was asking the question, really. So sort of whether you had some memories and experiences from that time. But you also did fashion, not design, but you studied that, and then you went on to sort of thinking about how to help people sort of in their looks and in their design of
Mhm.
their clothing, but also I guess their homes and their lives. And you've got this broader sense of wanting to help people.
Um, I never thought about it like that, but yes, I guess beauty is so important, right? Whatever, I mean, but a beauty doesn't mean that everything has to be beautiful. We all have like, it's quite subjective. So whatever I find beautiful, the other person might not find it. But I think it's such an important part of my life that, in a way, beauty comes from spaces, from clothes, from, you know, I feel like my brain doesn't work if my office or my house is not in balance and in peace and organized. So like that external beauty, also affects how my brain functions,
Hmm.
which is, I don't know if this makes any sense.
That's absolute sense. Yeah. Yeah.
But what I mean is like one thing helps the other, right? So maybe someone that feels good in their clothes, then is going to feel better in,
Yeah.
the outside world and so on.
I agree.
So,
It's well researched as well. There's a lot of research, psychological research about how you can behaviorally change how you feel. So one of the things that happens when somebody is ill, psychologically distressed, is that their physical space, their appearance, their sort of personal care deteriorates pretty quickly. Um,
yeah,
and it's well researched that if you just help those things, you help people's psychological sort of well-being hugely. Um,
yeah. Oh,
and there's a
yeah.
lot of research, for example, between, if you just go and wash up the dishes, it gives you a psychological boost because you're in the intimate living space is a reflection of the intimate internal space, that sort of thing. And that's what I
Yeah.
hear you saying, really.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, it's feng shui, isn't it? Yeah, it's like the energetics of like our spaces affect our inner
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, when you're sick and you've been 2 days in bed with a terrible cold or whatever, and the third day you get out and you have a shower and you put clean clothes and you feel like, oh my God, so much better.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah.
And because you recommended to me a woman who came in and cleaned my home this morning, and I feel great. You know,
See?
and
Yeah,
sort of I've been struggling to stay on top of it, and I decided not to struggle and just to get some help.
exactly. See,
And
the help
so
thing.
this morning it's great. I'm like, oh, this is nice. Look at this.
Yeah.
It really lifts. So all of those things, absolutely, I agree. And
Mhm.
it's really interesting. I wonder what you think about this. There's the um, appreciating beauty is psychologically a very sensible thing to do. But that, I guess, in the industry that you're part of, somehow it got distorted or manipulated and abused, and that's one of the concerns, I guess, about that industry is that it starts to create what is a very natural human thing and
Yeah.
distorts it. And I wonder what you think about that, whether that was your experience or not.
So mm, it's interesting because I have like two different views, right? Because when I was very young as a model, obviously you start thinking that if you don't fit in that certain pattern that you have to be, let's say that the centimeters or the weight or whatever, then you're not good enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting way of seeing that how society wants to fit everyone into that kind of like, suck that like everyone has to be or look the same or and I think back in the days there was not so much diversity in the fashion business. I think that nowadays it's changed. Now there's older models, there is bigger models, curve models, not necessarily just like very thin models, like white, black, Asian. There is like everything, like all, which is very important because we all have to represent all of us. We're not just one way, right? There isn't just. But when I was a model, I remember the trend was the Russian, very skinny, pale, blonde type of model, and I came from Spain. I have, I'm not that kind of. I don't have blonde hair. I don't have blue eyes. I'm not pale. I'm olive skin. I've got big lips. So I think that at the time I remember feeling like bad because I didn't feel that way. So I wonder how like, that translates into other people.
And
So
the
yeah.
design side of things as well. I'm interested in that. What that was
What?
like, the design side of things as well, because you did both, didn't you? You were modeling and then you moved into
So I did modeling for a few years, and while I was studying, I was still modeling. But then when I finished university, I went full on into just work and make a career for myself, and I left modeling behind.
Okay.
And I did styling, which I worked for magazines, for brands, and for with different photographers. So like, the styling I do is not so much with people. I don't style a person. I mean, I do style a person, but what I mean is that it's not private. I've done it, but I'm mostly working with brands and campaigns and, advertising and that sort of thing. There, it's quite hard to. I feel like in fashion now there is so much of everything that there isn't really just one trend of like trying to get us all in the same kind of fashion. So I don't think that's the way. But maybe Did I understand your question well? Can you ask?
I'm interested in what it was like to whether was that more empowering that side and less empowering than modeling. So you're now when you're styling, I guess you're making more decisions about sort of what it should look like.
I think, yeah, I think the modeling part I stopped because it was getting too emotional for me.
Okay.
So like while I enjoyed it, it was getting too painful to have like you get a lot of rejection also because you're constantly like doing castings and it's yes or no, whatever. And I felt like I didn't feel fulfilled by that life. So I think that, it got too personal to because it's very difficult to separate your skin from your skills.
Yeah.
Modeling your skills, your physique.
Yeah.
So, but now as a stylist, it's completely different. I have the control. I don't have to rely on my looks anymore to, to fit in or to do. So it's a completely different story. Yeah.
Yeah. And your sort of canvas, as it were, isn't you. So you're not having to
Yeah.
distort yourself. You can sort of look at objective things and have a
Yeah.
subjective relationship to them, which is really interesting, I think. I mean, I really identify with because I was an actor for many years. That was my first career. And that whole audition process was soul destroying.
It's painful.
Just cannot describe to people how horrible it is.
It is painful because you never know if you're going to make it or not, right? And I think that job is really great when there is work, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, but it gets too painful when there isn't.
But it's also that thing about the emotional closeness, I think, is really important for people to understand that. So theatre was very much like that. My tool was me and my feelings and my life experiences, and that's how I brought a character alive. And so it was very vulnerable making. I was very vulnerable doing it, and I sort of hear resonances of that when you're modeling as well. What people see is the objective photograph, but there's a human being in there that has vulnerabilities.
Yes. And I also think that because you're so young when you start this job, you don't have like the strength or the clarity that I would have now, or that's what I was saying, that having someone that had gone through it as a mother or whatever, it would have been really helpful, because now I look back and I'm like, gosh, I literally dropped modeling and went into work in a shop part-time while I was interning. Well, like I earned, I mean, nothing compared like to what I could have earned if I kept modeling, right? But it was so sensitive to me that the money wasn't even a question anymore. I just couldn't. But if I wish someone had been there to be like, don't take it personally, just do it, take the money and let it go. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or in that
I
sense, but it
do. I
was
know.
so close to me and to my
Do.
feelings. And like the rejection was like someone rejecting me and stuff. I couldn't, felt like I couldn't take it anymore. And I was like, oh, fuck this shit.
They've,
Sorry for my wording
no,
there.
they've started to do it now in the film industry. You have older female actresses working with younger female actresses to support them and guide them and give them sort of motherly advice, really.
Yeah,
And
I
to be
think
on and to be
it's
on
like a
set,
mentor. It's having a mentor.
absolutely. And to
Having
be
a
on
mentor
set
is
and say,
so
no, we're
important.
not going to do that. Because as you say, when you're young, it's difficult to say no because you're just excited, you want the work, and also you don't have the same confidence. But when you have somebody saying no for you because they know it'll cause damage. So you transitioned into the styling and you were working in that, and then boom, this extraordinary thing called the pandemic happened, right? And
Yes.
wow. And that must have just undercut everything you were doing because it all went, didn't it?
Yes, the fashion industry very much stopped. There
Yeah.
wasn't anything, yeah, because you couldn't go on shoots, you couldn't mix. So that's the way you sell clothes, right? By doing the shoots. Actually, a lot of the things were happening in their houses. A photographer would get sent clothes and then photograph, maybe the girlfriend, or like that's the way it worked, because
Yeah.
you couldn't do anything. So it really put a stop in like the fashion industry for sure. If you were freelance and relied on that, I guess it would be different if you were full-time at a fashion house, but pretty much um, jobs were gone, yeah. And I was pregnant. So
Yeah.
the last 3 months of my pregnancy, I spent in lockdown.
Yeah.
And in June 2020, I gave birth to Lucas, my son. So
He's a
it,
really beautiful boy. I've seen him
oh,
on my screen most mornings as you're mothering him along to wherever the childminder or somewhere. He
yes,
always looks at me
nursery.
suspiciously. I think that's very sensible of him. I'd be suspicious of me as well. To be like, as only young children can, with that completely open expression of "Who the hell are you?" And I think, well
Well,
done.
he's always suspicious at first, which I guess is a good thing, yeah. So yeah, that was interesting. Because it was, yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting having a child just when the pandemic
Yeah.
was starting to ease, the first one actually. And it was very stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was really tough because, literally there is no possibility even of the village in those early days, right? Because you're at home as a nuclear family.
Yes, you couldn't have like you as you plan. So in your head, you plan this moment in a certain way, and all of a sudden those options are all gone.
Yeah.
So you're very much alone. You don't have your family around. And they say that, having your mom when you've first given birth to your
Yeah.
child is really helpful to have around to help, to cook, to help with the baby, or and I couldn't have that. And I certainly, now that I look at my experience and my sister's experience, because she had a baby after me and she had the help, I see like we both lived a completely, different early motherhood.
Yeah.
So and yeah, I mean, and let alone because when I had Lucas, then the registry office, the passport office was all closed. So there was no way for me to leave this country to go to Spain, which added another layer on like what you're already dealing with of being a new mother, of not sleeping, like feeling powerless with this tiny creature that you don't really know how to look after in a way. I always think that you come from hospital, and so you buy a TV and they give you a 3,000 pound, a 3,000 page, instruction
Yeah.
folder, and then
Yeah.
you come
Nothing.
back
That's
from the
right.
hospital with a baby and no one tells you anything,
That's
and you're
right.
like,
Where's
do
the
you know
book?
what I mean? What do I do?
Except there are lots of books, and that's even more confusing, I think, because there's a plethora
Too
of
many
books.
books.
That's
Too
right.
many books.
Too many
Yeah.
suggestions. And
Too many books.
actually, I think you're right. We just need our handheld and somebody to go, there, it'll be fine. Let me just make you a cup of tea. Let me make you some food. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, because like this thing comes, like I guess, like it's incredible the nature of giving birth and bringing up a child. You naturally, do it.
Yeah.
Without any knowledge, which is so animal. I love it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah,
also you did struggle yourself, didn't you? You had some illnesses and some problems that you were facing as
so I
well.
think they got like, so I throughout like my, just even before I got pregnant, like throughout my, 20s, I had a lot of like health issues with my gut. Like I was constantly, going through all these changes and migraines and mood swings, and then hormonally and acne, like breakouts in my skin. So like there was always like all of these things that I could never kind of figure out. And I always thought of them as like bad luck or like something external, something that was really out of my control. And those times, because doctors were not very helpful, I started kind of researching and doing my own work with, nutrition. I started getting very interested into well-being and nutrition, and slowly I did my things. But it was always kind of on the side. But then when I had my child, I realized that it was, like all of those things kind of like got bigger. I realized, without the sleep or without rest, like how it break havoc in my body. And that's when I was kind of confronted with this idea of, well, we often kind of take our body and our health for granted when we have to do the opposite way. We have to take control of it. And that's when I decided that I was going to study, nutrition and well-being properly, to mostly to help myself, in all honesty. And I didn't really think about doing anything with it. It was just mostly like, I need to take this seriously and I want to know more about it.
Mhm. Because all these things combine to bring it to some sort of head. I mean, it's an obvious statement, but having a baby is a very physically demanding experience. Sort of growing a baby and then giving birth and then looking after a baby. These are physically demanding things. They are sort of really exhausting.
Physically demanding things, but also psychologically,
Yeah.
they're quite hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, physically it's so evident, right? The
Yeah.
physical we all see, we all, like, but like the psychological, emotional, it's often overlooked.
Yeah.
And I see it in a lot of people that like they don't even think that could be, you have like someone giving birth and 5 days after, yeah, they're doing normal life or whatever, and people don't really think that maybe something's going on underneath.
Yeah.
I had
Did
some
you
friends
experience psychological distress and challenges?
yeah,
Or
I mean, I was an absolute wreck. I remember the first few weeks of motherhood, very tough. Like I remember crying often and
yeah.
thinking, gosh, why I'm not happy? Like I'm a new mom, I have this baby. I'm meant to be the happiest person in the world because, I accomplished this and this is what I wanted and whatever. And I remember not feeling like that. I'm feeling very unhappy and tired and that also makes you feel guilty, which then it kind of like starts fitting this really weird vicious circle. Do you know what I mean? And then you get angry because of things, and it's just that side. I think it's it's often overlooked. And we talk about it more and more now, but sometimes I felt like when people talk about, the blues, the baby blues, or like postpartum depression and stuff, I've like noticed in conversations, like they're talked about like, oh yes, she suffered from postpartum depression, but more in a pejorative way rather than in an understanding way. It's like, oh yes, she suffered from that. Or like, do you know what I mean? When it's like, why do we still regard it as a bad thing? It's something that we can control, that it happens because of our hormones or whatever, can mix stress there. And it's more, I think it's more, I think more people suffer than more people doesn't suffer from it, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
I think it's more normal than
Normal, yeah.
I think it's a
And
very usual experience.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
And I
yeah,
think in other communities that are more connected, so that it's much more usual to have somebody available that you can just hand the baby to, and then
exactly, because maybe if you have that community, you don't suffer from it so badly, right? Because you have more help, you have people around. And I think that's the whole point. I think that's very normal and natural to feel that way. But when you
I,
don't have
I
that
think
support,
that it's more the word I prefer rather than suffer or stuff like that, because that makes it more medical.
right?
Which I'm sort of, I think there's a value in that medical approach. I'm
Mhm.
a great fan of when medication works for psychological distress, use it. It's
Mhm.
really helpful. But it's also more about managing stuff effectively or not effectively. And I don't think anybody manages well on their own. I don't think any human being on the planet manages well on their own. That's the truth. And I think
Yes.
human beings manage better in groups, in supportive groups. So then there's lots of evidence. I don't just think that, I know that for a fact. And the pandemic made it was very frightening and difficult experience. It's also an interesting experience to look at, because one of the things that seemed to happen is that, like all those zombie films, the zombie apocalypse happens, the society falls apart and everybody starts eating each other. Nothing like that happened. What happened was we started to help each other.
Yeah.
And we started to reinvest in our connections with each other, which is literally, and the research is quite clear, literally that's what happens whenever there's a disaster. And so
Yeah.
these American films of people shooting each other, it just doesn't happen. What
Yeah.
happens when there's a disaster, people band together because we are safer in a group always.
Yeah. Well, when in crisis there is change, right? That
Yeah,
is the good thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So things came to a head for you, and it's understandable because you were on your own, new mum, etc. And you decided, and I'm really interested in, and I've said this to you, I mean, interested in why it is that some people choose to embrace that and go, right, I'm going to learn about this, I'm going to transform this experience, I'm going to grow from it, and some people don't. And it's not a judgment, it's not pejorative at all, I'm just interested. You decided, okay, I'm struggling, this is difficult, I need to understand this, I need to change this situation and make it better for myself, right? And here's the trick, folks. All major improvements in life happen for some very selfish reasons. And there's that old saying, on the plane. It's not an old saying, but it's they tell you on the airplane, don't they? If the oxygen mask comes down, put it on yourself first.
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
such a fundamental rule of life, I think. So,
Yes.
what was your oxygen mask? What did you do?
Well, I don't know if it was an oxygen mask, but I just decided to study and professionally learn more about this thing. And then um, I found it so helpful and so fascinating, and almost kind of like that aha moment where you're like, oh, all of these I knew, of course, they're common sense, but then all of these things start making sense, and then you realize that, oh gosh, yeah, that is good, and that's why I do this, and that's why you eat this and do this, and then I just felt that I needed to share that with everyone, everyone around me, because it
Wonderful.
was so awakening for me. It was so, I'm not going to say life changing, but the perspective changes, and then you realize that,
You
oh
had a
gosh, we
Copernican
actually,
moment. Yeah.
yeah, we actually have the control of certain things, because in life, in this society, we don't have control of many things, because we can't control the toxins that are in the air, or the pollution, or etc. But we can definitely control our lifestyle and our well-being
Yeah.
by doing all these small changes
Yeah.
that will contribute to get into a more positive lifestyle, let's put it that way.
I'm
So
a great fan of small changes. Small
yeah,
changes are the big secret of life. Don't
because they're
try to do big.
sustainable, right?
That's exactly right.
They're like sustainable. If you want to go and start, with a big change, I find that the
You'll fail
it's
every time.
likely,
Promise you. You
yeah,
will just
it's
fail every time. So
it's likely to fail. So
Nutrition is the first thing you studied, right? Was that what led to the first magazine, Wholetalk?
yes, and at school, in order to get the certification, you also had to do a project. It could have been anything you could anything you wanted. And because my background is magazines and
Yeah,
photography and all of that, it naturally came to me that, oh, I'm going to do a health magazine my way, not like the typical ones, because there's some health
I
magazines
should
out
just say at
there.
this point, people should check out SB's Instagram account. It's absolutely drop dead gorgeous. I'm
Oh, thank
so
you.
jealous of it. It's so beautiful. Your eye for beautiful is really in there. So, and it's called Whole Talk. So, folks, go and check out that Instagram
Yeah.
account. Really is gorgeous.
So then I created this magazine with I wanted the content to be very comprehensive, positive, um, and easy to follow, and not really judgy or trying to, be you should do this and you should do that. It was more like, this is the information, this is positive, this is fun, this is good, you can be healthy and be happy, and this doesn't have to be a challenge,
Yeah.
and do with this information what you want,
So
basically.
you're
And also
treating
all
people
of
as
the,
adults and co-creators and equals and giving people, empowering people with knowledge and information.
yeah, very basic. It started more into like how we should behave in general with the seasons, because we're so disattached with the seasons
Right.
nowadays, I find.
Yeah.
So it started
Yeah.
more trying to like, we need to find we need to behave in a different way, like in the winter you eat hot meals, warm meals, the seasonal produce that is available is more nutrient dense, and then you transition into like the summer, and then you have to eat different, you go towards the more like water dense vegetables, the salads, this. And so it was more, it started being a just kind of like a brochure about how we should behave throughout the seasons, and
Okay.
in a
Right.
holistic type of way.
Beautiful.
Um, Not
Beautiful.
only this is a good diet, or because I don't really believe in diets. I think we're all different. And I think even if you and me live in the same street, in the same city, something that is good for your body doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for me.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Exactly.
So I think I think we have to be, with our health, we have to, I think the moment you start knowing about it and observing your body and listening to it, you start getting very intuitive, and you naturally start following what your body needs and what it doesn't. And we all know when we're being lazy or when we're actually resting, right?
Yeah.
I think, the day that you don't go to the gym, yoga, whatever your exercise is or whatever, because you know that you have to rest. But there are the days where you're being lazy. So I think only you can kind of like figure out whether it's one or the other, if that makes sense. That's where
Yeah.
that's
And
what
by
I
you're
really
encouraging people to
believe.
take ownership and responsibility
An
more.
intuition of like you, because sometimes obviously it's much better to rest than over exercise,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the only way for us to know that is to get in touch with our body and our like our own needs. So, and information is power. The moment you have all this information, then you can do with it what you want. And I take it for granted, because I guess it's now so ingrained in my routine and in my days that so many things I think that everyone knows. And then I go to my sister to visit her in Madrid, and I open her cupboards and I'm like, hang on a minute, in her kitchen.
That's
I'm like,
quite. I
what's
know.
going on here? And she's like, oh yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, oh gosh, so no, she doesn't know that, like, that it's so important to have good quality ingredients,
Yeah.
starting from like a good olive oil, a good salt. Guys, don't use like a refined salt. That's awful. Do you know, like those little things that are a change? Where do I start? Start little, and
Yeah.
then slowly it's going to become better and better. It's the same
Absolutely.
with exercise.
100%. 100%.
That's like the
But
same with exercise. Yeah.
the first edition was around this idea of nutrition and being in touch with the seasons.
Yes.
And
So the
you
first
didn't
one,
stop there, did you? You carried on. You decided to do more.
yes. So I did the spring edition because it was spring, and then I did the summer one, summer health, and then I did the autumn winter one.
Wonderful.
And then the fourth issue was about the earth issue. It was about the earth, like the five elements of nature, and how everything is connected. The health of our soil, of our planet, affects us, right? The same way the animals, and like we are all interconnected. So if you feed the animals with antibiotics and like, genetically modified corn or whatever, and then you eat that meat, and it's going to go into your system the same way that if you don't treat your soil properly, that's going to go into your vegetables, because that's where they grow. So like it was more about, these 5 elements of nature, how important the sunshine is, to be in the sunshine or to be in touch with nature, like earthing, grounding, all these concepts that seem a bit silly initially, but actually when you go deep, you realize that, wow, they're so powerful for our own health. So even actually talking about spaces, how we were talking about before, in the earth issue, there is a section also about how to create a healthier home, how, our spaces affect our own well-being, as we were saying. So
yeah, absolutely. With it, I mean, you're talking to the converted, but just thinking about nature, and again, people may not know this, but there's a lot of evidence to back up the statements about nature. Certainly, it's called biophilic effect, the impact that nature has on us. So, for example, and again, I know this because I've done this work, but people may not know it. If you build a park in a city, the violent crime around that park drops by 20%, just simply
oh wow,
20% with nothing else, right? And just simply because you built something natural. And there's a whole branch of architecture called biophilic design, because of making sort of human-made structures more natural,
nature-like, yeah.
because that enhances our sense of well-being. It also, and this is the thing about the reduction in violence, it enhances our sense of connection to each other. So why did we keep the parks open during the pandemic? Because that research is there. And it's one of the things that helps soothe the savage beast, as it were, is that, and
But
you
you know
get
what?
this,
In Spain, they did not keep the parks or anything open. That's
no,
why they went
no,
crazy.
I
Yeah.
know.
That's why I found, thanks to that, actually, I don't remember that time so traumatic, actually, because we could go to outside and we could go to the park, and it was amazing to be able to do these things outside. Yeah.
It was, and it was done on purpose as well, because the people who were leading, not necessarily the politicians, they didn't know what they were doing, but the scientists,
Partying with other
they
people.
did, thankfully. Yeah, they were just getting drunk and throwing up, but by the sounds of it,
Yeah.
I don't feel like, well, that's a different podcast. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested. Why do you think? Because we're getting towards the end, I'm afraid, SB. I told you this would fly by. Everybody says an hour. I can't do an hour, but we always do.
Yeah, I'm having so much fun. No, I don't want to leave. Okay, we'll
You
let's
won't be saying that next time you see me walking down the street. You'll be like, "Oh my God, him again," which is a
go.
very reasonable response, I think. Um,
Mhm.
so you did those. You're just working on another one at the moment. Is that right? You're working.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell us about that.
I'm working. The next issue is about living longer. So all things longevity.
Okay. And
Yeah.
just for the sake, is that hooked up to a machine just because we could, or is it?
No, it's more about how we can extend our life, but we don't only want to live longer. We want to live better, right? So there is no point on like living until 90 years old if we're gonna be suffering from pain and illnesses and like not having the freedom to come out. You want to live longer, but you want to feel better throughout all that
Yeah.
time.
And that's the
So
key thing. It's one of the reasons I make the lifestyle choices I'm making, because I'm getting older without, there's my thumbs up again. That's so funny. But I want a quality of life. I don't just want to be
exactly,
old. I want a quality
exactly.
of life. I want to be active. I want to be engaged. I want to have friendships. I want to be doing fun things. I want to be able to appreciate beauty,
You
etc.
want to thrive.
That's right.
It's about thriving and like living to our full potential rather than living at like 40%.
Yeah.
um so that's why I wanted to do an issue on longevity for a long while, but I just felt that now I felt like it wasn't right until now, because before I had to talk about the seasons, which was a very basic knowledge to tell people, and I think now it's nothing new, because longevity, actually, it is very much the same as I've been talking from issue number 1. It's about the seasons, about quality of product, it's about community, it's about exercise, it's about having a good diet. So there is no magic pill, or that's the thing. There isn't just one thing that is going to be, oh, this is the answer. It's not. It's like a
absolutely.
combination of things.
Absolutely. And they, again, because of the field I work in, which is sort of psychological therapies, it can tend to be dominated by this medical model, assuming that mental illness and mental health are these biological processes and nothing else. But where I come from is those biological processes are an expression of our social, cultural, lifestyle choices more than anything else, and that we have a massive impact on that. And we know that now through epigenetics.
Epigenetics, I was going to say, our genes are our genes, but we now can prove that we can modify those genes, right?
Yeah.
According to like how we live our lives. And
Absolutely.
I think it's fascinating. And I think that's why I got so into this whole thing, because it's like, wow, I mean, we have so much control and so much power, actually, so I want to use it in the best way possible, the same way I want to, tell these to my son. I'm literally, since he was born, I'm just trying to like teach him these lessons by example almost.
Yeah,
So when he's old,
your boy, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but I know he did suffer from an illness as well, and that was quite worrying to you. You may or may not want to talk about that. I don't know.
When he was 4 months, he developed an autoimmune disease called Kawasaki, and it was probably the most the scariest time of my life. I've
It must be
never
terrifying. I can't imagine.
such fear. Luckily, it got diagnosed quite quickly and on time, and in like the London hospital was amazing. So he got treated for it, and within within the first week, the symptoms started kind of reversing, and then we had to be in hospitals in and out for quite a few months with blood tests and checks and stuff. But then luckily, it's an illness that if they catch it on time and you have the treatment, then it doesn't mean that it's gonna come up again. The studies show that it's just that one time. So he's fully healthy now, and he's he has.
It underscores this key point, is that you're not setting up some opposition between lifestyle, medication, and medicine from trained doctors.
Oh, no, I think we're so lucky. I think we have to combine the both. I think science is so important. And I think, we're so fortunate in the country we live and in this side of the world, because we can have both. You can have your more intuitive side, and you take your control and be more preventive. And then you can also have like this amazing science that is great on crisis, right? This medicine is great to manage crisis, to manage like when there is no accidents or like cancers, or like it is so important we have these. But I think often this medicine forgets about the preventive side of things, and I think that's what we have to change. And I think that's what we have to educate other people in schools, young people, the young generations, because they will be the adults tomorrow. So, and I think integrating that, it will also, I always think that by us doing so, will prevent so many diseases and problems, and that will put less pressure on the NHS, on the healthcare system. You see what I mean?
The evidence, you're absolutely spot on.
Really interesting way of seeing things, and I think hopefully that's the way we go. I'm gonna show you, I have to share with you this talk that Andrew Weil, this American doctor, gives about this with the allopathic medicine and the preventive medicine, because I think you'll enjoy it. It was fascinating, and it's a bit like what he says, that that's how he envisions the medicine of tomorrow, having the preventive, and then obviously the science to treat all these crises. And
sorry to keep interrupting, because we're going to have to finish, but I'll ask you to text me that talk, and I'll make sure when the show goes out there's a link to it so people can see it.
Yes, I'll share. I'll find it.
Two questions I'd like you to think about. One is pretty simple, it's just information, but the first one is maybe not so simple, you may not have an answer now, but why didn't you go under through these problems? Why did you decide I have to learn about this, I have to do something about it, and I have to share this learning with the world? What is it about you, do you think, that makes you want to do that?
That question just made me shivers because we constantly thinking bad about ourselves, but actually that made me realize that I've got a good thing, that I'm always looking forward and I'm positive, and I felt like when you fall, you have to stand up and keep going, because otherwise, my name is Hope. My name means hope.
What a beautiful answer. The other one is less existential and a bit simple, which is, how do people get hold of the magazine? How do they get hold of you? Is it just the
So the
Instagram
magazine,
page, or is there?
so the magazine, you can go to Wholetalk. I'll send you the link. It's whole-talk.com, and you
Yeah,
can buy the magazine there.
great.
There is also, the magazine is also stocked in like different countries and different shops around the world. So you can see the stockist list on the website, and
Great.
also follow my Instagram for fun, I guess, and updates on the magazine and on health and tips and
The
tips.
Instagram is fantastic. I love it, really do. It's very inspirational stuff, and
Thank you.
I feel,
Um,
very blessed and lucky that I know you. I'm very grateful that you got over my annoying sort of loudness in the boxing
We
classes.
missed you on Saturday. I was like, where is he? He's not unboxing. Where is he? Yeah,
So that was it's been a real pleasure to get to know you, and it will be a continuing pleasure to continue to get to
yeah.
know. Hopefully one day your son will stop being suspicious of me and he'll start playing with me. But you never know. I think he's quite sensible to be
I
suspicious.
think it's
You
very sensible.
you stay there. So thanks, SB, for joining us. I
Thanks
hope you
for
all
inviting me.
Yeah, I hope you all enjoyed that. If you do have any questions, WhatsApp me on 07506 319 745, and I can pass on questions to SB. I'm sure she'll be very happy. But do follow her on Instagram because it's a hoot what she posts. I thank you all for joining us, and I'll see you all at the next show. You just stay there, SB, while I end the show for this week.